Welcome! Welcome. För er som undrar så kommer jag hålla den här inledningen på engelska. Men so welcome to Cooperation and Conflicts, a lecture organized by the Swedish Association of Graduate Engineers and given by Oskar Palmenfelt of Medlingscentrums. My name is Daniel Jarblad, and this lecture will be held simultaneously at about 100, I believe 103 workplaces around Sweden. Today, right now, we have about 1,900 participants at the same time in the audience. Welcome to you all. The Swedish Association of Graduate Engineers works to ensure that engineers play a prominent role in the future labor market. And we want to open society's eyes to the importance of the engineers' contribution to the development of our society. We also want engineers to achieve the best possible working conditions, of course. We surveyed our professionally active members, and there appears to be a potential for roughly 20,000 new technology-driven companies just among our members. But employees who start their own company need the same social security as an employee and a longer leave of absence period than we have today. We propose, therefore, an innovation year that would stimulate more engineers to make the ideas come to life that will create the new jobs for the future. We also work very hard on issues concerning equality, healthier workplaces, the global climate, technology interest in children, university and research, and much more. Our membership benefits include a free income insurance. If you are a member of unemployment insurance only, you will have managed about 14,000 crowns per month. With our income insurance, you instead get 80% of your salary. Our members are entitled to a labor market advice and support, which includes everything from reviewing employment contracts to support you when you are negotiating salary. We also offer a wealth of services to support for members' careers in form of engineering salary statistics. We have career seminars, career coaching, CV review, engineering networks, and much more. We have negotiated affordable, good quality insurances for everything from cars to health care that only members can get. In addition, our hard-working union representatives are working to achieve the best possible working conditions in your workplaces around Sweden. If you're interested in utilizing the influence of the local union, for example by becoming a union representative, please contact your local rep. You can join the Swedish Association of Graduate Engineers to get access to the full security service and networks that 145,500 engineers already have. How many here are members with us already today? Well, good to see you. The membership for employed full-time is 230 crowns per month. You can use this form, which are up on the different workplaces out there also, or visit Sveriges Ingenjörer.se for more information and to apply. But now, it's time to welcome our lecturer for the day with a big round of applause. Medlingscentrums Oskar Palmenfelt.
Thank you very much, Daniel. I'm delighted to be here today in front of all of you, and I want to say hello to everyone who's listening at your workplaces, at your homes. As you can tell, English is not my native language, so I want to apologize in advance if I would to stumble on the words or get a little bit lost with the language. We're going to go on here until 12:30 approximately, and after that there will be another half hour where we can where I'll answer your questions. And you had an address where we could send questions, weren't it? You can send questions via Twitter to cooperate, hashtag cooperation conflicts, and we'll address them at the end, so there won't be many questions during the talk. And I would also like to offer you these pictures that I'll be showing. You're going to be able to download them, and I'll show a QR code at the end of the talk, and or a mail address if you can't read the QR code, and then you can just add your email address and we'll send you all these pictures and also some of the tools for creating a better cooperation that I'm going to share here. So, my first question to you is grand. What do you think is the foundation for the human species' success here on Earth? Do you think it's our cognitive abilities that made it possible to harness fire or create the wheel or advanced tools? Or do you think it's language, our ability to communicate complex concepts to each other? Yes, it is. But I think we wouldn't get far with those things if it weren't for our ability of large-scale cooperation. Human ability to cooperate made it possible for us to move together into villages and organize there, build pyramids. Nowadays we've traveled to the moon and we've split the atom, and it's due to a lot of people communicating together. So those who communicate well, usually they excel. And those who don't communicate so well, those individuals, organizations, they disappear. So I would like to share with you today a few insights about communication that we have discovered at the Medlingscentrum while we've been working with conflict resolution and mediation between individuals and within organizations through the years. And when we've been thinking really, really hard about this, we found out that the basic, like what we'll try to do now is to build the formula for workplace cooperation, an equation. And the first factor in this formula for cooperation is a win-win mindset. The decision, to make a decision that you're going to look for solutions to problems that will satisfy both your needs and desires, but also the needs and desires of other people. And a mindset, it's a map that you have in your head, a map. And a map usually shows you where it's possible to go, it shows you where it's not so good to go, and what's not on the map. People usually don't go to places that are not on the map. So we need to include in our map the win-win road. And for example, imagine that you are in a classical James Bond type of first-person shooter computer game, and you're Mr. Bond standing there with your Smith & Wesson pistol. In front of you is a huge room full of the evil villain's henchmen. At the end of the room is the door where you need to exit. What do you do? Well, the intuitive thing, I think, for most gamers would be to shoot your way through that room and exit. But had you had a map of the facility, you might have seen that there is a small door into a ventilation vent right to the left, right to the right, and a corridor where you can circumvent this huge room and find another exit at the end. If you'd known that and took that road, you would have made a win-win decision, because you would win. You would enter, you would exit the room safe and sound. The henchmen would win because they wouldn't die. But it might be a little bit more difficult and hard. You would have to think a little bit. You'd have to look for the door, maybe crouch down, get a little bit dirty, crawl a bit. It might take longer time. But usually when we find win-win solutions, it comes with extra benefits. Because if you were to exit at the small ventilation door, at the alternative exit, maybe you wouldn't alarm the guards that are standing outside of the main exit. The guards in the big room wouldn't sound the alarm. So you would sneak out in a better way. The other day, when I was thinking about what I was going to say to you, I went, when I was on the subway, I watched a few TED Talks. And there was a TED Talk given by a young boy from Kenya. And his name was Richard. And he started his talk by saying, "I hate lions." Because apparently he was in the Maasai people, and the Maasai people, they get their adolescents to take care of the cattle. So it was his responsibility to take care of the cattle, and every now and then there was a lion coming out of the Nairobi National Park and killing the cattle, which they didn't like. So the Maasai, of course, they killed the lions. And that wasn't much to the delight of the local and international environmental organizations, obviously. So there was a clear conflict of interests here, which made me interested. We have the same conflict in Sweden, by the way. We have wolves, and we have sheep farmers, and we have hunters, and it's quite an inflamed conflict. And I know about it because I've been teaching both at the Swedish Association for Hunters and the Swedish Environmental Agency. So I know there are very hard feelings here in these kind of conflicts. Anyway, Richard, he and his Maasai people knew that the lions, they were afraid of fire and lights. But they had also discovered that lions aren't afraid of fires when they're still. Lions are afraid of fires when they're moving. So Richard, he had to walk around with a burning torch all night to scare away the lions when they were around. And this wasn't much in Richard's interests. He wanted to sleep in his bed at night so that he could go to school at days. But then Richard told us in the speech that he was very interested in electronics and taking things apart, basically. So what he had done was that he took his mother's radio apart, and then he used some parts from an old motorcycle, the direction indicator, and he took some light bulbs from old flashlights, and somehow he built a system around the cattle pen with blinking lights that were blinking at night, which worked. It scared the lions away. And I was baffled. Wow, that's a win-win situation. The cattle get to live. The local and international environmental agencies or individuals are happy because the lions don't get killed. The lions are happy, they don't get killed. And Richard was happy because he could sleep in his bed instead of hunting lions at night. Richard actually got a scholarship, he told us, to a well-known international, well-renowned engineering school in Nairobi after that. So we see that win-win solutions, they can often be technical solutions that resolve relationship tensions between people. So that's the first part of the equation. To make a decision, a firm decision, I will use my win-win map. First and forehand, I will try to look for solutions that will satisfy my needs and the other party's needs. And we see that when people use this approach, when they go into different dispute situations, disagreements with this approach, you ask different questions, you see different solutions. They often this famous outside of the box solutions. But there are some serious things going on also in our Swedish workplaces, and we need to get a bit serious when we talk about conflict. Ponder these numbers. 450,000 That is the amount of people in the Swedish workforce that has ever experienced harassment or bullying in their workplace. That is 1/10, 10%. So everyone knows someone who has experienced this. Many people who are listening has experienced bullying and harassment at work. Huge problem. 10,000. That is the amount of Swedish people in the workforce currently at sick leave because of dysfunctional relationships at work. Disputes, harassment, bullying, conflict. It makes people sick. 100 is the amount of persons every year in Sweden that, due to bullying, choose to commit suicide. 100 every year. And you don't want to contribute to that, right? No one wants to contribute to that. I'm pretty sure that you guys would be the first to stand up and say, hey, that's horrible. We need to stop this. Where do I sign? Of course, no one wants this to happen. But how can it be that it does anyway? Responsible, nice, adult people get into these situations. We have a theory that we see pretty clearly. It's also proven in work environmental science. Conflicts lead to harassment and bullying. Conflict is a highway to harassment. We're going to see a little bit how that works with this model for conflict escalation. There are a few models of conflict escalation out there on the field. We chose this one from Kerstin Ljungström and Tom Sagerman's book, Conflicts at Work, or Konflikter på jobbet, because it's very clear and simple, and it's only about the workplace. On the vertical axis is resources that's used up, consumed, when we have a conflict in our work group. It's when I ask people, what kind of resources do you think it is? They usually say time first. It takes a lot of time to have conflicts and to have all the administration around that. They say the quality of work goes down, their output is worse, and they say money, because it is about money at the bottom line. It costs all this consuming of time, productivity, of course, costs money. But in the more serious phases, people start leaving their jobs. They look for other jobs. People have to go on sick leave. They have to pay for that. And in the very late phases, they have to pay for pay consulting bills and pay people to leave the work. And the Swedish company Previa, who works with work healthcare, they say that a serious conflict can cost up to 500,000 crowns a year. And I know not so many Swedish big companies that has in their budget a few millions every year for conflict resolution. It always comes like an unexpected cost. And that's why we see that we need to prevent conflict at an early stage. So phase number 1 in our escalation model is the disturbance phase. And it's small signals of conflict, not so obvious. It can be about a little bit about bickering, it's minor irritations. People are slamming doors, not saying good morning. Harsh discussions. And it stems usually from people's needs not being met, basic needs. I did not get to talk at the meeting. I didn't feel listened to. I was totally convinced that I was going to lead this project. Now I don't get to lead this project. I feel that someone's being rude to me. Small, normal things that happens every day in the workplaces. Conflict, phase 1 and 2, it's always on. And it should be on. Because our job is not to eradicate conflict from the surface of the earth. Our job is to handle conflict in a constructive way. Because what we see is that in every conflict is a seed for development. if a routine at work is not if something is not working at work, or a relationship is not working well, we need to develop that. We need to see what's not working here, put our minds to it, and find a good solution. So conflicts in phase 1 and 2 are welcome, but we need to handle them as soon as possible and with our win-win mindset in place. Because say we have Mr. John here and Mrs. Jane, and they're arguing. John, he got the job as a project leader, Jane didn't, and they are arguing, was this right or wrong, or who's going to do this in the best way. And when arguments tighten and people are polarizing more and more, and it's stop listening to each other, going more into discussions and debates when you want to overprove the other part, then we can enter phase number 2. It's the difficulty part. And here you can see that the quality of the work and the efficiency is being affected. It takes a considerably higher amount of resources to get the same things done. But still, it's not a huge conflict. Most people would maybe not even label it as a conflict. It's a disagreement, a dispute, quite a factual problem that needs to be solved. You can see it's only a phase 2 because it's still within the work group. It hasn't spread to other groups, or maybe it's just between a few people. And usually it can be smoothed over. If someone else comes in and asks, okay, how are we doing here? How's work going? People will say, yeah, it's business as usual, stuff's working. Someone will invite everyone to an after work, or they will buy a cake for Friday afternoon. It's kind of trying to keep the nose over the surface there. But if we don't handle things there, if frustrations rise, and especially if you seek alliances with other people, then things are about to get dirty. In phase number 3, we see scapegoats. Someone is guilty of the problem in the work group, gets the blame. We hear rumors and bad-mouthing behind people's backs. And we see grouping and alliances between, for example, John and his colleagues that are on his side, Jane and her colleagues on her side, polarizing against each other. And the main advice here, which we always push hard on, it's take action here. It's some people, they would reason like, okay, we'll sit around, we'll wait a little bit, we'll see, maybe they can sort it out, they're grown-up people. Yeah, that's what we can do here in the early phases. In phase number 3, it's pull the emergency brake, stop, we need to do something. Are you a manager and you see these signs in your work group? Lift your phone, dial the number to the HR department and talk with them what to do. Because you need to take action. The first thing we recommend is to gather information. Do not make unconsidered decisions that you haven't thought about. You need to know what's going on. Is the scapegoat really guilty of everything? What is actually going on? Who's included? So in that phase, you have a responsibility to do something because it can be a work environmental problem, and this is where people start going on sick leaves. If you are a coworker and you're in this situation, do the same thing. Call your manager, call the HR, talk things through, get things done. Because otherwise we can end up in phase number 4, which is the public conflict. Everyone knows that something is going on. No one's happy. Everyone's affected. It's spreading like rings on the water. People are asking for strong responses, disciplinary actions. We need to do a reorganization. We need to, someone needs to be fired. Something big must be done. And people are jumping the ship here like rats from a sinking ship. The best minds, they will not stay in that situation. And maybe that's not such a bad advice. If you work in an environment like this, it's most people that I talk to that have been in these organizations, they said, we left. So you do not want to be here. And that will conclude our second factor in the equation, which is take action early. Because early in the conflict, there is not a big risk for harassments and for sick leaves and for stuff. Use your win-win map, take action early, and it can be a bit, it's like a fork in the road here that you see. Imagine that we're in the J.R.R. Tolkien novel, The Lord of the Rings, and we're walking around here in his world, and we see a crossing in the road, and there is a road sign there, which is not on this picture, and to the left there it says Mordor. To the right it says the Shire. That's where the hobbits live, and it's all butterflies and waterfalls and Gandalf blowing smoke ships and stuff. Which road do you want to go? It's like, am I going to take the conflict road to Mordor? Yeah, then we stiffen up, we harden our arguments. Or do we want to walk to the Shire? Maybe that road is a little bit more uphill, maybe it's more winding, but it's going to be more comfortable there. If you choose this road, it's going to be much harder going back, especially when you enter the territory of the orcs. Good. So we have the two first factors in our equation here. Let's search for the third one, which happens to be the holy grail of conflict resolution. This factor is what the geeky conflict scientists are sitting up late at nights and discussing while drinking too much red wine. This is a particular skill that is hard to master, but it can be trained. And it's called perspective awareness. The ability to understand that everything I see in the outer world, it's my interpretation of things, depending on my history, my backpack of things, and to know that I have a perspective, be it a political perspective, individual, a value, a religious, we all have different perspectives. And to understand that and to be able to step back from your perspective and see things from other viewpoints. It's a skill that requires quite a lot of self-insights, a high cognitive ability. We see it in many of the greatest leaders. They have the ability to juggle with perspectives. Let's take a closer look at that. Oh, here we have Mr. John again, existing in a huge black space. That's the outer world. In the outer world are the material things that you can touch and things that John can see and hear. And it's facts. It's things that can be measured and weighed. Factual things. And inside of John is John's inner world. We have his feelings, his thoughts, his personal history and his personal needs. And on John's nose are his glasses, and those glasses symbolize a filter that will interpret and corrupt and distort all the factual information that comes in from the outside. Will be formed and shaped through John's lenses. So, for example, if John were to encounter a spherical white object and wear his blue spectacles, which color do you think the ball will look like through John's eyes? It will look blue. And oh, what's happening now? Jane is entering the stage, and she is orange. She's wearing her orange spectacles, walking up to John and saying, "Hello, John, what a nice little orange globe you have here." Well, John, he was, "What do you mean, orange? Everyone can see this globe is blue." But Jane, John, it's orange. We need to be reasonable about this. Everyone can see the globe is orange. Well, but Jane, my young friend, with your experience and young age, I don't think you're the one to consider what color this globe is. Oh. Well, but John, don't use those arguments. The globe is orange. Everyone can see that. Well, but Jane, I think we should ask our friends here, what color is the globe? John brings his blue spectacle wearing friends there, and everyone agrees that, yeah, Jane, yeah, you have to listen to John here. The globe is actually blue. We can see the globe is blue. We have had several meetings, and the globe is blue. Everyone thinks so, except from the guy who's not on the picture, who's got green glasses. He just sees these people. What are they talking about? They're stupid. Everyone leaves. But Jane, she doesn't like the situation at all. Here we have John, and we have John's friends, and they're using arguments about her age and her experience. So what does she do? Well, she lifts her phone and she calls the union and says, I'm being harassed by John and his friends. Oops. All right. So John's manager goes out to John and says, John, you cannot harass Jane because of her age and her experience. We don't do that at our workplace. Well, John's, harass? What are you saying? I didn't harass her. I was just stating facts. She's the one harassing me. She probably wants my job. She's after me. She wants me to look bad. I'm going to file a complaint about harassment to her. You won't believe it, but that's the kind of things we see out in the workplaces. And what we are always trying to do is to get these people to change glasses, isn't it? John can see that, yeah, well, from this perspective, the ball is actually orange. And Jane can see that, yes, it is blue from his perspective. And there's another thing to perspective as well, because conflict has, one can say it has two levels. We have the outer level, John's outer world, which are the factual, the actual things that are happening, and maybe the routine on how we're going to solve a certain problem. And then we have the inner world, where in the inner world, in John's and Jane's feelings, we have to talk about feelings when we're talking about cooperation and conflicts, because that's the big challenge when people are not agreeing. That's why people have to go to sick leave. They get sick because they have feelings. They are afraid. They're stressed. Maybe hate someone. Those are not good feelings to carry in your body. So we need to work with those feelings, and in this kind of situation, yes, we have the issue about the ball, but we also have the hurt feelings of John and Jane, and they're feeling accused, and John is a bit afraid of Jane here, making him look bad, and Jane feels put down by John. That's what we're trying to get people to talk about. They need to talk a little bit about their communication. Okay, we have a disagreement. The ball is there. It's outside of us. We need to be able to talk about it in a constructive way without attacking each other. It would be very good if John and Jane had a manager or a partner at the HR department who could sit down with them and just make them talk a little bit. Jane, how did it feel for you when John said those things about your age and your experience? And she can talk about her feelings, and then we get a totally different conversation, because when she's talking about her feelings, that John can't argue about that. She has the feeling she has. She feels put down. She feels sad. It can't be argued about. The color of the ball, yes. Even though it's measurable, it's factual, they argue about it because they interpret it different. But when people can talk on a feeling level, then a perspective shift can happen. I was, last week actually, I was doing an advanced course in mediation. And one of the participants at this course, she told us a little story when we were talking about perspectives. Back a few years ago, she was commuting between Stockholm and Gothenburg, and she was going home to Stockholm late at one night. She really wanted to rest, and in her train cart was a family. It was a father with 3 children, and those children were all over the place, and they were screaming and they were crying and they were playing and they were climbing on stuff, and the father didn't do anything. And there weren't many people in the cart at that time of the day, but there were a few, and everyone was very annoyed. So she decides to walk up to this father and talk to him and listen, what's going on here? You have to control your kids. So she does that, and she tries to be very constructive and talk to him, and she said he looked half dead there, and he told her, yeah, I know it's a problem, it's horrible, we're going to Stockholm to the funeral of the children's mother. And she said that's where quite a powerful perspective change happened. She could totally feel empathy. She started to cry. she sat down, talked to him, and it didn't matter how much noise these children made because she could have a massive empathy for him. So that's the kind of perspective shifts that can happen when you get deeper information about what the person is actually experiencing. Good. So that's the third, I think, the third factor here in our equation, our formula for cooperation. It's the ability to take perspectives. And the last thing that we need is a little toolbox. We need some tools for resolving conflict. And I'm going to give you 2 tools today. Those are the tools that you also can download after the talk. The first one is our guide to conflict coaching. It is just a document, an A4 paper, with a few questions that are completely aligned with this formula. The intention is to use it on your own. You can use it on your own to prepare for a conversation with someone where it doesn't feel very easy and someone that you need to understand. It can be in your workplace, it can be relatives, neighbors in the bostadsrättsförening. No, there can be a few conflicts there. Or you can use it as a coaching tool with someone else. If you're a manager or you meet people sometimes and you want to coach them through conflicts, if Jane or John comes to you as a manager, you can use these questions to prepare them, get them into a better mind. And it's designed to evoke the win-win mindset and to take perspective and to take action early. And it's just a few questions. The first is describe the situation. What is going on? And find the key things that needs to be addressed. For example, Jane and John might need to talk about their communication and their feelings when they're accusing each other. And they need to maybe to talk about the color of the ball in a good way. They have 2 themes here they need to discuss. And the second question is, what do you feel in the situation? Because feelings are important. And it's sometimes with feelings, it's like taking the troll out in the sun. It disappears when the sun shines on it. When you state your feelings, you're aware of your feelings, they kind of diminish a bit. They become easier to handle. And most people don't realize how many and how strong feelings they have in conflicts. Third question is, what are your needs? What do you need in this situation? You need respect. You need maybe more information. You need to feel secure in dialogue. What is it that you need, Jane and John? And the fourth question now is very interesting. It's how do you think the situation looks from the other person's perspective? And I think that's the question people seldom ask themselves in a dispute and a conflict situation. Because if you don't have the win-win mindset, you're not really interested in the feelings and thoughts and needs of the other person. So that's what we need to think about. How does the other person, how does it look from their perspective? How do they feel? What do they need? And after that, we're primed and ready for thinking about solutions, because we always need to be solution focused when we're working with disputes and conflicts. And so next question is, how do you want the relationship to look forward? If this is obviously a relationship conflict. How do you want the relationship to look? Well, it should be professional. It should be inspiring. It should be mutually beneficial. All right, those are the goals here. So what options do you see for achieving this? And when you think about options in a conflict, we always recommend you to think about more than one option, a few different ways, one little pathway circumventing the big room with the henchman, or one way climbing over, one way going around. So you have a few different options. And the last thing that you should consider is very practical, very concrete. What am I going to do? When am I going to do it? With whom am I going to do it? If I intend to take up a conversation with the other party, how will I express myself so that this person, so that I won't inflame the situation further, but rather heal it? So we become very practical, and if it says I'm going to do nothing, okay, good, then you do nothing, and don't do something more destructive. That's our first tool, the Guide for Conflict Coaching. On this document, there is a link to a YouTube movie, and if you're a manager or you intend to coach someone with this document, with the conflict coaching, watch that movie because it's really interesting. It's just 13 minutes, and you can see how a manager takes a young person through a mental journey. And it's I was happy when I saw it because it was he used exactly these questions that we have on our guide. So good. And now the second tool that I want to share with you, it is a format. It's a meeting format that you have in your smaller working group. It's a meeting that solves problems early, that allows everyone's perspective to come up, and that when people are working together to get win-win solutions. It's called the traffic light meeting. Traffic lights are a great metaphor because it's red on the top, it means stop, and you use post-its. Red post-its, stop. Yellow post-its, okay, we need to take action soon. And green post-its, this is good, we need to celebrate this, keep on doing this. And I know everyone has been on these huge conferences where it's open space and post-its, and it's a whole wall covered with post-its, and it's messy, and no one even has the energy to write everything down, and it isn't followed up, and it just falls to the ground. That's not the kind of post-it meetings we're talking about here. There are a few differences. It needs to be reoccurring. It needs to come back 3 or 4 times a year. You do this meeting with your group. And you need to solve the issues that comes up there and then in the room, because your work environmental issues should be handled by you. You get the responsibility, but you also get to take responsibility for your own situation. So it's not a to-do list for the manager. And it's you're maybe 10, maximum 15 people. The one who leads the meeting just asks what in our work environment is working good, what's working not so good. 10 minutes writing the notes, and then everyone presents their notes, and we do common brainstorms around the problems and set rules for them. For example, our mailbox are clogged. What are we going to do about it? It's messy in our office. Some people like it messy, some people like it clean. How are we going to solve this? Someone's stealing my ketchup all the time. I can't handle it. Good, so that's the traffic light, and we in the mail that we're going to send you is a link to a movie. It's in Swedish, but it's a movie about exactly how you do the traffic light meeting, and it's many people have started using it. It's a forum for early dispute resolution. It's recommended in the literature, all the literature about conflict resolution. There needs to be a forum for the group to talk about this and resolve things early. Good. So, to wrap things up, let's see if we can find an equation for this. I've prepared this just for you. It's the first part of the equation is the win-win approach. And then to that we need to add the early action. Then we need the perspective awareness and our tools. And I encourage you to get a much bigger toolbox. These were just 2 tools, but you need to know the I message, how to give good feedback, a little bit of mediation maybe. And if you're a manager, you need to know that conflict resolution is a core competency. So managers should have quite a few tools in their toolbox. All right, and what does this equal? Peace. Peace at work. So, what? Oh, sorry. There we go. This is the QR code that you can scan, and you can write your email address, and you'll get all the pictures. You will get the 2 tools. You'll get some information from us. And usually when we do these talks, there are always people coming up and say, my husband should really do this at his job, or we'd like this talk. So there is also a discount code there. If you want to book this talk, you'll get a 10% discount by using the code in that mail. If you don't have a QR reader, you can mail Charlotte, our administrator, at info@medlingscentrum.se. Just an empty mail. You don't need a subject or anything, and then she'll send the mail to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oskar. Really great. Very interesting. And now we have a little bit of a question time now. I know outside in the workplaces and I know a few people need to get back to work because their lunch is ending. But I want to ask you some questions. We had this Twitter feed, hashtag cooperation conflicts with C's and 2 O's at cooperation. You can send in questions now. I have you on the phone in that case. I was just, first of all, wanted to say that I think that a lot of engineers and our members out there right now is going to start building lion fences at work. I sort of feel it. I feel it's coming. It's coming. It's going to be great. And I also wanted to ask you, I was thinking this, we're talking a lot about interpersonally and so on with these issues. But what about like on an organizational level, from a management perspective also? I think there's a lot of managers also listening, and a lot of people who wants to tip off their managers, I'm sure. Yeah. How do you sort of build a good system for conflict management? I know you brought up some examples of the meetings and so on, but like from a strategic perspective.
Yeah, well, my tutors at the Gothenburg University, his name is Thomas Jordan, and most people in the HR community know about him. He talks a lot about a system, what's they say, a system for a robust cooperation culture, which has several steps, and this is what we always talk to HR people, and when we're out, we're doing trainings at workplaces. We try to build this system, and the first, if you remember the phases of escalation, phase number 1 and 2, that's the manager's responsibility. That's where he or she needs to be and be active with the group, solve conflicts, and then there needs to be an agreement between the manager and HR or some external consultants, the union, that if we see a phase 3, the manager needs to get good coaching. And if the manager still can handle the conflict, that is, the manager is not him or herself a part of the situation, because then he obviously can't handle it. But if the manager is not a part of the situation, he or she should stay and help to handle the situation, gather the information and solve it. And if a conflict escalates to phase number 4, you need to have good consultants connected to you, like the Företagshälsan or like Medlingscentrum, because then you need help from an external party. That's what the Swedish environmental law says. There needs to be an impartial person doing the mapping out of the conflict. So what we see is that managers need to have a few tools that they commit to. For example, some kind of traffic light meeting. Yeah, let's start from this point. The work environmental law in Sweden says that we need to work systematically with preventing harassment and bullying at work. So that means that the managers in all our workplaces need to do something systematical to prevent it. And the traffic light meeting is one of those systems where you resolve conflict early. And with the manager's tools, they need to be connected with a policy at the workplace where it says very clearly, if I feel harassed, I'm going to do this. I can go to this person, usually the manager. If the manager is harassing me, I can go to another person. And then there will be a routine. And our strong recommendation is to write this policy, the policy for kränkande särbehandling. so that you open up for dialogue, some kind of mediation. Don't go directly into this mapping of conflicts and trying to find who did right. We have Jane and John here. Who was right? Who was wrong? Someone is the offender and someone is offended. When it comes to that, it's a lose-lose situation. Everyone feels like losers. We'll try to get dialogue between them. And when you get that into your policies and to your working, you will create a talking, we call this a talking with environment. People talk to each other and not about each other. Like that's what you as a manager want to create in your small group. So basically, the manager, the tools for early actions, the policy, and then the resources from HR and from external consultants to step in when the conflict is worsened. That's a foundation for a culture of a robust cooperation culture.
All right. Yeah, I forgot to say, of course, you here in Polheimsalen is of course also welcome to ask questions. Just raise your hand. We have a mic they can go around. I just want to ask you also a short hand raise question. You guys here? You can raise hands also, of course, in your workplaces, but I won't see that. Like, how many of you know that you have this sort of policy and plan, and that you are aware of at your workplaces? Just to, that's scarce.
Yeah, and I know that's something that you work with a lot in the union as well, and every union, and I've also seen that. I think you have some tips. This is what I'm going to do from the union's perspective.
Yes, of course.
If I experience this, and you probably have counselors that you can go to if you see something or if you experience something yourself.
Yes.
So it's a very good resource. And
yes, of course, do not forget.
No, but actually, it's many times when we talk to manager, we hear that the union can be a problem and they're taking stands. What we see is that the union is usually a good resource because they know the law, they know what you can do, and it's really good to have the union.
And a lot of managers actually feel that way as well.
Exactly.
It's my experience. We have gotten a few questions in here on Twitter. Hoping we get the time to ask all of them, hopefully. When should, from Forever Young, it's lovely with the Twitter names here.
Yeah.
When should one handle the conflicts, and when is it better to just turn away?
If the question at hand, the ball is not so important. If it's not important to you, don't go there. Don't drive that conflict. It's better to. A friend of mine said, "Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy?" Sometimes it's just better to let it go if it's not important. If the relationship is not so important, you are not going to work so much together. It's not going to affect your relationship a lot. Then it's not so important to get the good resolution with the relationship. Do you see what I mean? Then maybe you don't need to go into a constructive dialogue there.
Right.
But when the issue is important, when it's a big issue, whether it's at your workplace or in your family, or if it's a big and important issue, then you should really take your time, take out your win-win maps, work a lot on it. If it's a very important relationship to you, yes, then take time. That's my best advice on that.
Right. We have also from Erik Fröstad. It's in Swedish, so I'm gonna ask it in Swedish. 10% blir trakasserade eller mobbade på jobbet. Hur ser det ut i skolan för elever? Vet du någonting om det?
Jag borde veta, för vi arbetar rätt mycket. I should know, because at Center for Mediation we also work with training teachers, but we train them in conflict resolution, not in working exactly with bullying, because we don't use mediation in bullying situations. Mediation are used in the earlier phases of conflict, but if we have a bullying situation, it's we call it the difference in power, in status is so big, so it can be dangerous to mediate. You really need to know what you're doing then. But I know there is a really interesting TV show. It's called Morgan's Mission. It's an actor called Morgan Alling. And he made a series of TV programs about bullying at schools, and he saw it was a huge problem. But when he did that, he realized that bullying is a huge problem at working places as well, because he saw this. 10% has experienced this. So I'm sorry, Eric, but I cannot tell you an exact number. I think it's a bit higher at the workplace, but at the same time, I think it can be perceived as worse to the grown-up individual.
Yeah, more serious.
Yeah.
Right. And you mentioned, and you're talking about mediation, and sometimes it's not suitable or unsuitable. But is there anything else you can convey about like how mediation works? I mean, it sounds very. I mean, we do mediation, of course, in the labor union quite a lot. But for me to play a little dumb here and ask you, what did you tell me?
Yeah, but mediation is used. Yeah, like you say, quite a lot by the union, but it's not used so much internally at the workplaces in Sweden. Actually, we suck at it. In Norway, for example, it's very common to use mediation at workplace conflict. They have something called a konfliktråd in each fylke, which is like the municipalities. They have offices where everyone can come with their conflicts and get mediation. I just read a report from a Northumbria Healthcare Trust, which is a huge association which caters for healthcare with hospitals and home service for 500,000 people. And they have this system for conflict resolution where they have trained the managers to do, for example, mediation, giving them tools. They have upgraded their policy, and they have created a talking with community there. The Royal Mail in Britain, they have trained 10 mediators that's working with mediation part-time. 5 from the union workers, I think they call it there, and 5 from management. So in America, I read this thick book about how the Fortune 500 companies are working with structures for conflict resolution, with mediation, with arbitration, skiljedom, and totally systemized. So we're horrible at this in Sweden. And basically it is that the manager has the guts and the competency to sit down with 2 people where it doesn't work so well and have a common sense discussion. But mediation is a bit structured, like you sit in a special way, you have you set the frames, there's certain frames for the talk, one talk at a time. You talk about what's in the outside world, what's in the inside world, and you focus on a solution. And I encourage everyone to learn a little bit about that and to try that, because it's a phenomenal way of ending conflict at an early stage.
I was wondering myself here, as I'm standing, also that that we are not maybe as good as some other, for example, in Norway, when it comes to these sort of issues, that it may have something to do with that we are popularly considered to be quite bad at being direct and in conflicts. Then we also afraid of touching conflicts. And I also got a question here from Favorit Niklas.
Yeah.
How are amount of conflicts in Sweden compared to the international community in regarding to the leadership culture? So
that's a very interesting and quite complex question. At the moment, I don't know of any international research papers on the amounts of conflicts. There are some research done on cultural differences by Hofstede, and Hofstede did a huge research on that. What they see is, well, basically the conclusion you can make is that if a manager from Germany were to come to Sweden, you would probably have conflicts around him. I know several cases, because he would be a little bit more authoritarian. He would have a different leader style that doesn't work for Swedish people, because one of the factors, the cultural difference factors, is called power distance. And in Sweden, it's a very small power distance. We don't like big authorities making decisions for us. But in Germany, they love that. Or at least it's in their culture. So it's normal that you say herr to your manager. So that can cause conflict. I know it's enough to go to Denmark and you'll find that people are more direct. They say what they think. It can be a small a heated argument and then people are happy. But to Swede, that would feel next to harassment. Be scared of it. So my advice, Niklas, was it that? Would be to be a bit careful around other cultures and use this perspective awareness and don't judge too fast and read up a little bit on different cultures. And give me a call and we can talk if you have a specific situations. We're always open at Medlingscentrum. We always give 30 minutes of free counseling for everyone who we know and have met and want some advice on the situation. So. But be aware of cultural differences. I can't give you numbers.
Well, one thing is also very positively considered. So it's like everybody loves feedback.
Yeah.
Or do they? Sometimes. But you know, sometimes when you sort of, I want to give you a little bit of feedback, and I sort of feel like, oh, that's great, and then afterward you don't feel so great. So how do you do that in a good way? Really, I mean, it sounds so good, but it doesn't always end up feeling so good.
It's hard. I usually get a knot in my stomach when someone says I've got some feedback for you. And actually it happens that people call us and they have a conflict, you know, phase 3, phase 4 at their work, and they say, Oskar, won't you come and give a little half day on feedback here so we can resolve our deep-rooted conflict? It doesn't work. You need deeper action if it's a deeper conflict. But to have this talk with environment, not talk about in the early phases is very excellent. And I encourage all of you to get good at feedback. And I think there are some core competencies, but the more I work with conflict resolution, the more I see it's in the structures, the agreements, the frames around things. So you will want to talk about rules, what's that? Spelregler, about feedback in your work group. What kind of feedback is okay? Which feedback is appreciated? How should we give feedback? When? In front of whom? So that you have some agreements, and that's going to make it a lot easier to give feedback when everyone has the same idea about it. But when you do it, it's the I message that I think is very good. That you describe, you know, the glasses there. You need to try and describe the things that you have seen in a very concrete way. I saw this, I heard you do this. When you talk in that tone of voice, when you're running into my office, when I'm at the phone, I feel this is happening to me. I get stressed, or I get annoyed, or I get curious about your way of respecting me, or whatever. And then you ask for what you want. I would like you to knock before you enter my office, or it would be magnificent for me if you would take your dirty cups of coffee away after you've finished them. Or you open up with a question. I want to talk about, or you tell them about your problem that he's running in on you when you're on the phone, and how do you think we can solve it? I see you have good intentions for doing that. For me, it's not working very well. How can we find a win-win solution here? It's always a good thing to frame your feedback in a good way. I've found something that I'd like to talk to that could make our cooperation better. I would like to ask you a favor, or you put it in a nice favor, so you don't come with the idea that you need to give the person feedback so that he or she should change her personality. It's like about interacting in a practical way. Yeah. Good feedback. Yes, I was also thinking about, there's something that we consultants like to teach about, and it's called the feedback stare. Have you heard of that? And it's about receiving feedback, and you can do it from different levels, so to speak, different levels of awareness, of perspective awareness. And I don't know it by heart, but the bottom steps, it's like you just deny it, or you counterattack the person. Yeah, well, but you did this last night or last week. And when you come higher up the stair of receiving feedback, it's some steps that are more about you can listen but not really take it in. The next one of the higher steps is to be really interested and know that this person has his blue glasses on. He's going to interpret the situation totally different. How interesting. How can I learn something about this perspective? Please tell me more. What was it that annoyed you a lot? How did this situation affect you? Please tell me more. Do you have a few options for me? That you're just interested? And because you see, what happens many times is that people go into defense. And that's what we're afraid of as well when we want to give feedback, right? So the gift, the service that you can give to someone who will want to give you feedback is try to shut your mouth with your counter argument. Don't come with counter arguments. Instead, try to understand. All right, please tell me more, so you understand more. And the last step in the feedback stair, it's to make a sound and good decision. Is this good feedback? Should I take it to my heart? Then I will change. Is it not good feedback? Then leave it out. Maybe you have to adjust your behavior a bit so that the other person can tolerate being in the same room with you. But if it doesn't suit you, drop it.
I'm also thinking like the difference between like feedback and orders. That like somebody comes with feedback, comes to me and says, "I have some feedback to you." Then I take it as feedback. You know, I listen to what you have to say, and when you're done, I'm gonna do whatever I want. But I of course hopefully listen to you. But like so that is something I think might be also be dangerous perhaps for a manager, that to like I just have some feedback, and it really what they want to come with is orders, what I wanted to do or what I wanted to and then like how do you separate these, or how do you relate with these so it doesn't become a problem in communication? For example, well, it can be manager to employee or employees between.
Isn't that the typical Swedish manager coming to his German co-worker? Hey Hans, I have some feedback for you. Why don't you do things in this way? And Hans will just say, yeah, well, thank you, I don't give a heck about that. Because he'd expect the manager to go and tell Hans, now it's this, you need to do things according to your instructions. So I think we can get better at that in Sweden as well. Some things are feedback, they are wishes. Some things are things that are written in your work agreement. You have to do these things. That's your agreement with the employer. And not everyone always thinks about that in your agreement with the employer says that you need to cooperate with your colleagues, with other people, and you need to cooperate with them even if you don't like them, even if they vote on that political party that you cannot vote on, even if they, you need to cooperate with your colleagues. It's one of your duties at work. And I think I like to talk about like a frame. We have one frame. We have the contract between the employee and the employer. Those things are not, you don't mediate about that. You don't give feedback about that. That's what you do. And then the things outside of that, how we communicate, how we relate to each other, how we make decisions, other stuff, that's what we mediate. So it's about being aware of where are we now? Are we talking about something that's negotiable, or are we talking about something that's not negotiable? Basically, and to try and have that picture in your mind, especially as a manager.
Yeah, and also one thing when we're talking about this kind of issues is a lot of like, how do you handle this at the workplace, and how do the managers handle this within the organization, so on. But as you brought up during the lecture and so on, I mean, if you have a problem at your workplace which is related to work environment, you feel that you are harassed, you feel that you have this kind of, that this is a legal measure also. So this is important to, when you see this kind of problems, to also contact your union, because it doesn't mean that we come in with the big canoe normally, but it is like you really have to the big gun, sorry. Canoe, that's a nice one. But what we can do a lot of this give you a good advice on how you manage this, and to separate between what can we do based on both in negotiations and so on from our side, and when is it better to solve it in a different way, and so on. So then it's really good just to call us. We have the number, the advice phone on 0861380000, if I memorized that correctly.
So that would be a kind of a deeper kind of conflict coaching, where you get really good advice and get someone to talk to and work on the
and
on
clear
the
what is legally an issue here or not, and it can be based on many things. So don't forget that. I don't think we have any more questions. Anyone else here who wants to? Oh, we have a hand here. Great, lovely.
It's actually not a very deep question. You answered one of the questions in the beginning with, do you want to be, I don't know what you call it, right or happy? And this, when you talk about win-win, when you mention just the word win, you imply that somebody loses in the way. Could you maybe rephrase and say happy?
Yeah, but what we like to talk about is win-win solutions. Then we have win-lose solutions. It's like either Jane or John wins and the other one loses, and that's like the kind of common idea how you solve problems. One win, we have that everywhere. Politics, sports, everywhere. One wins, one loses. That's like kind of how things are, and we want to get to the win-win approach. Then we have the lose-lose approach, when both lose, both players die. What I mean by do you want to be right or do you want to be happy is more, sometimes you get into these heated arguments and you know it's not going to lead anywhere. It's just going to lead to a lot of adrenaline and frustration. You discuss something that's not really important, and then that's kind of the point.
I have a lot of that with my mother.
Yeah, but exactly. I think that's more kind of a personal advice than a workplace advice. Like, because I know I have a friend and he always goes into discussions. It's horrible. And he comes to me and he speaks about his relationships because he's dating around, and it's always like when he tells me, how are you communicating? Instead of listening in the other person, he goes into a discussion with them, and that's the kind of that in that realm. This advice is good. Good.
Great. I'm just gonna double check the Twitter here if we have got any more questions in. We did not. Then we say thank you very much. Lovely having you with us, and
thank you.
And you will be hanging out for a few minutes here if somebody a little bit shy and want to have a question also.
I'll be here for a while.
Thank you all over Sweden as well. Thank you for being with us, and have a lovely afternoon. Goodbye.